Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the QCast. It is the 20th of February. And again, when I'm in recording these, sometimes they will go up a day later because we like to do, put the front end on and just allow the time to transpire to get them uploaded to YouTube and then onto my YouTube channel. By the way, I'd like you to join my YouTube channel because we're going to be sending out updates and getting notifications. One of the things that I don't do that my YouTube team can do is send out notifications when I put out the QCast. Now, with so much happening and so much taking place, I want you to know I'm probably going to try and shoot after this week because I'll be gone filming for our new documentary. But after this week, I'll be trying to put a QCast up. I'm going to try to do it once a day. So barring any unforeseen interruptions, of which I have probably 50 a day, it will be at least every other day. But today I want to talk about something that's in the news and going to become more important. Now, someone said, would you please elaborate on what you said that Mars is going to fill the headlines? One of the things that I've tried to do is give you, those of you who read my website, listen to the appearances on the different radio shows I do, is a heads up of coming headlines. For instance, the cannibalism meme has come into play in a big way again, with even the Smithsonian putting out, let's just say this, their 2 cents worth, and talking about things as gross as what does human flesh taste like. I was just talking to Tim Alberino in the studio next door, and we were talking about something interesting. Isn't it amazing that the very institution that covers up the true history of the desert Southwest and the cannibals and all of the Mesoamerican, Aztec, Inca, Mayan, all of the Karnakawa in Texas, going into the mound builders, the idea that cannibalism used to be taboo and would never even be touched about and even was denied at times by the National Park Service, now it's coming into the headlines. You cannot escape it, and what I'm trying to do today is I'm going to talk about some of the interesting aspects of astrocatastrophism. We have been lied to about so much, so many things for so long. Where do you begin? But I want to begin reading a book that I bought one of the original copies of years ago, and it's basically Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly, Donnelly. And this particular copy is 1882. And it's important to understand that even though Plato was the one that recorded the conversation between Socrates and one of the priests of Egypt. He got it from Solon, who was the gentleman who actually was the one that interviewed the priest of Egypt. They have a lot. The priest basically said this: you Greeks don't have any history. We Egyptians know the real history. Now, one of the hardest things to talk about is not only true history, but prehistory. And I want to share this with you. I'm going to read it because I don't want to screw it up and paraphrase it. And this is coming from about page 8 of the original book. And here's what he said. Solon, hearing what was said, what do you mean? Talking about that the Greeks don't know true history. And he said, I mean to say, he replied, that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which this hoary with head age. In other words, you're getting gray and you don't know what you're doing. And I will tell you the reason of all this. There have been and there will be, again, many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. I'll say that again. There have been many and there will be, again, many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is Phaeton. He goes in talking about one of the Greek myths. There is Phaeton, which even you have preserved, that once upon a time, Phaeton, the son of Helios, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth and was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now, this has a form of a myth, but really signifies a delineation and declination of the bodies moving around the earth and in the heavens, and a great conflagration of things upon the earth recurring at long intervals of time. Notice this, that the priest that Solon is listening to knows the difference between actual events and the myths that the Greeks believed that were based on the actual events. And that, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I go into great detail in my book, True Legends, and also Angel Wars. Angel Wars is a very prominent book. Unfortunately, we're out of stock for another month on that, but that's neither here nor there. Now, listen to this. It is impressive to me that this priest is talking about times going back 9,000 BC. And 9,000 BC is a big deal. So here's what it says. Now, this has the form of a myth, which we just talked about. And here's what he says. Earth, and he's talking about conflagration of things upon the earth recurring at long intervals of time. When this happens, those who live upon the mountains in the dry and lofty places are more liable to destruction than those who dwell by rivers or on seashore. And from this calamity, the Nile, who is our never-failing, quote, Savior, saves and delivers us. When, on the other hand, the gods purge the earth with a deluge of water, among you, herdsmen and shepherds on the mountains are the survivors, whereas those of you who live in either cities are carried away by the rivers into the sea. But in this country, neither at that time nor at any other time does the water come from above on the fields, having always a tendency to come up from below. And in the Bible, the Old Testament, it talks about the fountains of the deep were open. Now, the reason I'm starting out this QCast is even today on Drudge front page, there's a story that Elon Musk landed the rocket back on the launch pad in Florida. But he made the statement that we must go to Mars because if we stay on this planet, ultimately we're going to face a doom scenario that's even beyond those who would call, those of us who are trying to warn, doom or fearmongers. The massive sinkholes opening up, the ground swelling, the ground breaking, all these different events that are happening now, the floods obviously in California and the weather warfare that's taking place. I make no apologies for that. It is full-scale weather warfare. The temperature of the water in the Pacific is going to an all-time high. And listen, let me share something. Fukushima will be seen in retrospect as one of the most deadly events in the history of the Earth, possibly aligning even with the world of fantasy in the death and destruction it's going to bring. I don't think people understand that one of the byproducts of fission, F-I-S-S-I-O-N, is heat, extreme heat. And if you remember when Fukushima first went off, the seawater, they were trying to cool the core. And it wasn't just one reactor, it was 3, I believe, and then a breeder reactor in which plutonium was actually generated. When you get into the nuclear physics of Fukushima, what's happened is that standard nuclear physics and all of the exposure and dose rates have been abandoned. They've been forsaken and forgotten. So why this is critical at this point is simply this. The Great Starvation has begun. Floods can destroy more land and more property based on probably 50 years of insurance claims in the history, even going back into the turn of the century, than any other single natural disaster up until Fukushima. I categorically reject that Fukushima was a natural disaster. Again, it was not natural. What's really unnatural is the response of the mainstream murderers. Now, you know, we usually say MSM is mainstream media. But again, it's going to become very apparent as more cancer turns up and more people die by the their medical response or biological response to ionizing radiation, whether they're ingesting it, breathing it, eating it in fish, whatever. The point that is really critical for you to understand that things have not settled down in any way, shape, or form. Today, the 20th of February, one of the most important volcanoes in the world has starting to go active. And what's fascinating is Anak Krakatoa, which means son of Krakatoa, all of the different myths and legends associated with the volcano, and especially in the area of Krakatoa and Mount Tambora, Indonesia, all of the historic influences on the weather, on growing seasons, and on famine, it seems like they're all kicking into high gear. The late Sue Bradley, a very dear friend of mine who wrote essays with me, she has an essay which I'll be posting on my website, Sue Bradley, and it may already be on the internet someplace, but it's Anak Krakatau, and some people pronounce it Krakatoa. It was used to be spelled with an O. Now it's spelled with a U, Krakatoa. And based on some of the South Pacific pronunciations, that may be closer to the correct one. But why is this critical? Because, as I said, Anak Krakatoa, which means the son of Krakatoa, Anak, when Joshua and Caleb went into the Promised Land in the Old Testament, there they beheld the sons of Anak, the giants. And ladies and gentlemen, the idea that all the earth-shifting events that are taking place, and I'm going to say this, both terrestrial and cosmological, which is going to launch me into my whole update on Mars in a minute, but the cosmological events are very much responsible for what happens on Earth, to the denial of those who basically believe in false science, to those who will not acknowledge the cataclysmic formation and the undertaking of the different planetary wars that have taken place. So I want to share with you just a little bit on this QCast, the importance of Mars. Now, it's interesting because the ancient Chinese knew Mars as the fire star. The Sumerians thought Enlil, Mars, was the cause of the Great Flood. Classical Greeks indicted Ares, Mars, as the bane of mortals. And the Romans saw Mars as the god of war. Why? Well, these are a lot of questions that have been kicked around for so many, I would say this, hundreds if not thousands of years. So in talking about what's going on with Mars, it becomes imperative that we get to the issues at hand. And the issues at hand, I made some notes, and I want you to know that these are not all inclusive, but it's enough to wet your whistle, okay? In the Old Testament, catastrophes are not only a repeating scenario, they're periodic. You know, whether you're dealing with the Sumerian clay tablets, whether you're dealing with the ancients' fascination with the stars, they knew something of the records of antiquity because they were always looking, if you will. They were the internet watchmen of their day. In their case, they would have been their inter-society watchmen of their day because they knew that they were periodic. Those who had observed and written down what had taken place in the heavens prior and even post the events that did take place reported them really accurately. It doesn't matter. Whatever society in the world that built advanced architecture, pyramids, etc., they all have their eyes on the skies, focusing on specific constellations, Pleiades, Mars. Jonathan Swift knew that Mars had two, if you will, moons. One of them is believed, Phobos is believed to be totally artificial. If it's artificial, then it was built by someone obviously way before us. And this is what is astonishing to me. When the catastrophes begin, they were preceded by earthquakes. Now you're going to love this. Cosmic lighting, thunderous cosmic noise, volcanism, and celestial flybys. We just had another asteroid that they didn't see coming, or if they did, they didn't tell us. And the idea that everything that man does affects his environment is just horse manure. You know, the fascinating thing to me is, listen to this. 4 times in Hebrew records, the night of March 20th through 21st involved an angel from heaven bringing fire, celestial noise, earthquakes, lightning, and sudden destruction. It was their Passover. And the old traditions of the different recorded, if you will, the different cuneiforms, whether the different parchment, whether they're the Dead Sea Scrolls, they have a lot to talk about this because, again, most people don't understand the similarity of Earth to Mars, and I believe that it can be proven, and I'm going to be putting out something later in book form that lines up with the late David Flynn's work, Cydonia, The Secret Chronicles of Mars. I'm the publisher of that. It was published originally in 2002. That I'm going to put all this stuff and tie the whole issues of Mars together. David was a premier thinker. In my opinion, the smartest man I've ever met. I've known a lot of smart people. I've known guys that are out there, so brilliant that they have to go to kindergarten level to help me to understand everything. But let me share this, and this is something that I think that people will be surprised to find out. When you look at the spin rates of Mars and the Earth being so similar, the spin axis tilts of Mars and the Earth are so close, okay? Give you an idea. Mars is 23 degrees, 59 minutes, and the Earth is 23 degrees, 27 minutes. They are within 32 minutes of each other. They, too, are nearly identical within 2.3%. And this is what's really important. The Roche limit of nearby Mars was the specific agent causing the fragmentation of a former 10th planet. And this is basically termed Astra, A-S-T-R-A, that was blasted into asteroids. The two planets were on a collision course, with Astra overtaking the red planet. The timing was thousands of years ago, not millions. By the way, there are actual records from different societies around the world that Mars in about 1780 BC actually came so close to Earth that people on Earth could see volcano, the biggest volcano on Mars, called Olympus Mons, actually erupting. So what's important is that in dealing with the similarity between Mars and the Earth, something doesn't fit. In other words, you're talking about an elliptical orbit and Mars being knocked out of its circular orbit by a planet that is being fragmented due to Roche's limit. And Roche's limit basically states that two planetary bodies coming into proximity to each other, the greater gravitational field or density will cause the lesser gravitational field and lesser density to explode. Now, what was interesting, too, is that the Greeks were so fascinated by this, but most of the astronomers that are called gradualistic astronomers just claim everything's a coincidence. Somebody once said to me that a coincidence is nothing more than the lie that they encapsulate for the greatest amount of people to believe at the contemporary time that the lie is put forth to them. So basically, nothing that they say, in my opinion, is true. I'm sorry, but that's what when I talk about classic science. Now, in talking about the entire Earth-Mars similarity, actually, 97.2%, you then got to go into the idea of the Earth's rotation rate, which is 1,436 minutes as measured by fixed stars. The spin rate of Mars is 1,477 minutes. There is, again, a spin rate of only a difference of 2.8%. Now, what does this all have to do with us? Why is it critical? Because in the Antarctic, here we go back to the Antarctic, the scientists have stated, and you can look this up and do a search on your own, but they've stated that they found Martian meteorites in the Antarctic, and they are claiming that Lake Vostok, from the time that before it began to freeze, had 2,500 species of sea life and other strange anomalies. Well, we always hear about the sea life, but the strange anomalies. And since I last gave you the update on Antarctica, for the record, now the King of Norway is reported to have gone there. I don't think people get the fact that the aristocracy of the world, both in the West, obviously Europe, Asia, and Europe, and Eastern Europe, all the way to the Orient, they have people that claim that they are the dynastic inherited rulers of those who came from the stars. Egypt was a good example. Now, the work that L.A. Marzulli's been doing on the Paracas skulls, when you look at Egyptians who are in the kinghood, the priesthood, or the queenhood, they all commemorate the cone heads. I obviously know Saturday Night Live made that very, very prominent, but that was a sign to them of divinity. Now, everybody married everybody, including brothers married sisters, sisters married brothers, fathers sired children by their daughters, you name it. So the bloodlines are sort of hard to track, but in Europe especially, these people declare their, if you would, godhood, and therefore they're in a position to make decisions that affect everyone else's lives. So as we're going into just this immediate update, I want to warn you and take this to heart. The acceleration in the topic of Mars concurrent with Antarctic. Now notice this, Mars did not come back into play in a big way. Oh sure, we've had the Martian Morse code, which I have a lot to say about, the geoglyphs of Tiwanaku, which David Flynn was the first to draw people's attention to the fact that that was a language, that also it's almost like an electronic printed circuit. The Martian landscape and the coordinates on Earth of everything like the pyramid, the Sphinx, the different, if you will, pillars on Mars, and the pillars are on a round planet, not the pillars supposedly holding up a trapezoid. And it's funny, isn't it, that you can get all these pictures, even from Baumgartner, who took the balloon up into pretty close to the stratosphere, and then parachuted down out of it, and you're seeing his GoPro all the way up, and I guess he didn't hear that he should have checked with the internet first to make sure it was circular, because he might have missed the edge of the world and just disappeared forever. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. The idea that all myths, legends, and oral traditions all center around one thing, and that one thing is there were catastrophic events, planets, stars affected the things on Earth. You know, Nibiru, Planet X, Gabriel's Fist, Lucifer's Hammer, all the different names, the 10th planet. I don't think it was a 10th planet because the 10th planet got blasted due to Roche's limit. But all of the different scenarios for Nibiru or Planet X, let's call it Planet X, and to me it should be called Planet Known, not Planet X as in X, you don't know what it is. But do you really think that those in power are going to tell you what's going to happen before it happens? Let's take a good example of this. Do you see kind of a beginning stage of denial? And I pray that Oroville, that the dam holds, the spillway holds. But notice this, that they sure waited a long time to give people a heads up. And now on the news today, it's claiming that they'll have a 15-minute notice. Go in an ultimate panic and see what you can remember when you know you've got 15 minutes either to die or to make it out alive with just a shirt on your back. Hopefully they have bug-out bags. But ask yourself this. What happens to some of the most fertile farmland in the entire West Coast that produces fruits, vegetables, nuts, all sorts of industry? They've got dairy industry there, obviously cheeses, milk, yogurt, all the stuff that comes from the Central Valley in California. Ask what happens should that dam collapse. And if you were a very sinister, wicked, evil, demonic entity, no, I'm not just talking about our Congress and those who fit that category, but what would you do if you wanted to get rid of people? You'd starve them to death, a.k.a. Fukushima. You'd initiate earthquakes, and for the record, you can initiate earthquakes and volcanoes. Former Secretary of Defense Cohen is on record as stating the same. Zygmunt Brzezinski, whose daughter is in the news nowadays, he's on record as stating the same. The weather modification, We Own the Weather 2025, the Air Force document. HAARP coming back online, in my opinion, never went offline, but for Bernard Eastland's patent, you can take this patent to the bank. 4686605. There are over 200 weather control patents. We're seeing that. And one of the things that especially geologists and hydrologists have always been concerned with, what happens when a extreme amount of water floods the faults? Does it act as a lubricant, therefore increasing the chance of earthquake? And some people claim, no, it has the opposite effect, that it lubricates, therefore the friction is stopped. I think the preponderance of evidence is in the first statement I made, that it can initiate earthquakes. We hear very little, quote, real science on the amount of volcanic ash going up into the upper atmosphere, the sulfur dioxide going into the water, and that produces sulfuric acid. People say, the Pacific Ocean is a big place. They don't understand radionuclides. They don't understand ocean currents, and they don't understand the amount of time it's been since that time. And I think we're coming up to that March 11/11, and now we're coming up on the 2021st, according to the times that the planets came into the Earth's, if you will, magnetic field or gravitational orbit, and cause such tremendous damage. The Noah's flood is one thing, but Jeremiah's flood, a lot of people have been asking me about that. I'm going to do a whole show on Jeremiah's flood. That was prior to the recreation and replenishing of the earth. Now, you can get people to fight over anything. One person has an opinion, second person has a differing opinion, and then everybody who is around the camp of this guy, that guy, me, you, the other guy, they'll all team up and they'll take their position. My advice to everybody is to seek it out yourself. Seek out the thing. And a great proverb is what? It's within the heart of a king to search out a matter. So as we're kind of closing this episode out, I want you to stay focused on the catastrophic consequences that you begin to see, not just now, snow in Saudi Arabia, flooding in Saudi Arabia, Australia, all-time heat record broken, fires here, fires there, rifts opening up. By the way, the Martian Great Rift, and that's what's fascinating too, because the Martian Great Rift is phenomenal, and it's bigger than the U.S. And so, bigger than the U.S., bigger than the Great Rift Valley in Africa. Now, the United States is going to have some amazing rifts too pretty soon, and it's not just going to be the major Northridge fault line, San Andreas, all of the ones that are well known, especially by the movies that have earthquake themes. It's going to be some obscure faults that trigger some of the biggest quakes in our history. And this is astonishing because as Astra, the planet, was taken out of existence, the calculation of the speed of those asteroids of the basically broken in piece planet were traveling at somewhere around 25,000 miles per hour. And what's important for you to know in the book of Job 9:5-9 has to say, and it's talking about God. Suddenly he, God, moves the mountains, overturning them in his anger. He shakes the earth to its foundation. The sun won't rise if he commands it so. Only he has stretched the heavens out and stalked along the seas. He made the constellations, Bear, Orion, and Pleiades, and the constellations of the southern zodiac. Well, that's pretty interesting because he moves the mountains. Somebody said, well, that man can make the mountains move, and I got news for you. I'd say go to the book of Job, and you'll find out something else that's interesting. Now, I'm going to touch on Bode's Law. The Bode's Law is the rough rule that predicts the spacing of the planets in the solar system. The relationship was first pointed out by Johann Titius in 1766 and was formulated as a mathematical expression by Bode in 1778. The law relates the mean distance of the planets from the sun to a simple mathematic progression of numbers. Listen to this. To find the mean distance of the planets beginning with the following simple sequence of numbers, 3, 6, 12, 24, 48, 96, 192, 384, and just notice everything's doubling. With the exception of the first two, the others are simply twice the value of the preceding number. Add 4 to each number. And listen, 4.7, 10, 16, 2.8, 52, 100, 196, 388. Then divide by 10. The resulting sequence is very close to the distribution of the mean distance between the planets from the sun. This is how they can calculate that, obviously, between Mars and Jupiter, this planet we're calling Astra existed. So when you look at, let's just go this way. Mercury is 0.4, Venus is 0.7, Earth is 1.0, Mars 1.6, 2.8 would have been Astra, Jupiter 5.2, Saturn 10, and Uranus 19.6. And if you look at the actual distance, you're looking at 0.039 or 0.39, 0.72, 1. Earth and is the same on its actual distance as its Bode's law. Mars 1.52, actual distance or AU. Astronomical units, 1.6 under Bode's. Jupiter is 5.2 on both. Saturn 9.54 against Bode's law 10. Uranus 1919 versus 19.6. So what does this mean? This means some phenomenal design and placing. It also explains why Mars can have the pockmarked judgment, if you will. It's my contention that the fallen angels lived on Mars. It's my contention that the United States, has a base under Mars. It's my contention that Mars is habitable. It's my contention that Mars has been one of the first places when we reverse engineered the 1947 Roswell and other crashes that we went and established a base on. As a matter of fact, I've been told by people that the name of the base is the same as David Flynn's book, Cydonia. So when you look at all this cool stuff and the mathematical distances, and you find out that the Bode's law works for moons around planets too, in the same way that I just defined Bode's law versus astronomical units, you come up with the idea that not only did he who made all this and made it with such mathematical perfection, but by the laws that we understand, especially Roche's limit, that God's the only one I know that can move planets at will, and he's the only one that can protect from straying asteroids or the planet coming in to our celestial sphere. Ladies and gentlemen, I started out this with the book, and I think it's critical, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. Let me make sure you can see that again. 1882 it was posted, and this is one of the original first copies. It's kind of fallen apart. But I would encourage you that as you see James Cameron, The Search for Atlantis on the National Geographic Channel, as you see the work that we're doing in True Legends, the series, the DVD, and I want you to see the DVD. And the third title of our coming True Legends is True Legends, There Were Giants. I promise you that you will not be able to escape the fact that not only they're here now, as we've laid out, L.A. Marzulli, myself, the pilot, Tim, but when you see what is going on in Sardinia, when you see that even the Nuragi and the Nuragi culture was beyond the Pillars of Hercules, if you take that meaning the Gibraltar area, and out into the Cadiz, Spain, and the bays off of the south eastern coast of Spain, you'll understand something, that the residue and the remnants of this catastrophic judgment on Atlantis is soon to break forward. So watch for that. It will start to take hold of the headlines. How do I know this? Because I believe by the grace of God, it's going according to the script of when the knowledge brokers have decided to break this little by little to people. All of a sudden, they're going to keep us occupied, and then we're not going to really, I would say, truly be able to cognitively assess the danger that this planet is in. Because it's also amazing to me that when nations and former empires go into the realm of genetic manipulation, that it goes without saying that judgment of Almighty God falls. Now, people that don't believe in God, you can not believe in God, But I will tell you this, it's astonishing that at the exact same time that Sodom and Gomorrah, that Abraham fled historically, that they get destroyed. And the critics you say, that's just a bunch of those crazy Bible believers. But those crazy Bible believers knew one thing, that they knew that God had stated that he would spare it if you could even find but 10 righteous people. Abraham, the great intercessor, and they couldn't find 10 righteous people. The parallels to our time right now, animal, human, genetic manipulation. Today, the Chinese have just announced, it was on the front of Matt Drudge, I go there obviously to see the themes that are being presented. They have live DNA that they believe they can clone the woolly mammoths. Well, I'm not worried so much about woolly mammoths. I'm worried about woolly giants that were frozen into the ice and taken, literally sawed out of the ice, that have their genetic material being ready in a lab to be released, and that being inserted into unwitting U.S. soldiers who will then turn into super soldiers, and with the acknowledgement that you can make a perfectly trained killing machine that has no conscience or no morality. Add on the if you will, the push for cannibalism. Even some of the robots have been stated that they can run on human cadavers. They'll have an internal furnace, and they'll generate power out of that. But I'm more concerned about the giants to basically fill in ancient history. When those things come back, everybody looks good. That's less than them in size, and it won't be M&Ms for whatever that stands for. It'll be P&P, people and persons, that are on the menu. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is the QCast. It's February 20th, 2017.